Welcome everyone to another A Day in a Life of. Today is a day in the life of a CRO. With me, we have Stephanie from SmartBug Media, we have Regev from Incredibuild, and we have Joe from Influ2. With no further ado, I will let my guests introduce themselves, telling us what they do, what's their company about, and we just go from there. Stephanie, tell us all about you and your company.
All about me. We don't have time for that, but I'll go ahead and do my introduction. Uh, Stephanie Valenti, I am a Chief Revenue Officer at SmartBug Media. SmartBug Media is one of the largest HubSpot digital agencies, servicing all of their hubs as well as a Klaviyo Elite partner on the DTC side. So really offering business strategies for growth. At SmartBug Media, I always like to say CRO is different everywhere. So for me, CRO means total go-to-market motion. So I run sales, marketing, all of our delivery teams, product, revenue operations, and enablement. So anything that touches the client journey, I am a part of it. I live here in DFW, the Dallas, Texas area, 3 kiddos. It's a snow day for us, so you may hear some clatter. I'll try to keep it on mute when that happens, but that's a little about me.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Joe, you are also covered in snow, at least the area where you are, right?
Yes. We're supposed to be covered in snow here, though. Where in Dallas, that's not why you live there. Nice to meet everybody. I'm CRO at Influ2. Influ2 helps our customers drive sales efficiency with digital air cover aligned with sales process. So we like to say we make sales easier for our customers. I oversee sales and customer success here. So driving growth, planning go-to-market strategy, everything aligned with that. Similar to Stephanie, just don't have marketing.
Awesome. Well, we go deeper in all of those topics during this episode. Great. Thank you so much. Regev, last but not least.
Yes, hi everyone. I am not covered in snow, but in Tel Aviv right now it's really rainy. But we're spoiled. We used to great weather here. So I relocated back from California actually after 14 years in February, so still adjusting back to Tel Aviv. But I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Incredibuild. I agree with Stephanie, the definitions are different everywhere. So I'm too responsible for the entire customer journey from messaging and branding and marketing, lead gen funnels, all the way to sales, customer success, customer support, revenue operations or business operations, as well as technical support. So Incredibuild is a build acceleration platform. So we take builds that take X amount of time, and we shorten the time for developers to complete the build. If you're a developer or running a big IT team, you know how painful it is to sit there and wait for builds to finish. It could be hours and many hours. So we really shorten that down sometimes to minutes. And that's what we're doing globally. I have global teams, basically teams everywhere in EMEA, in Asia Pac, in like China and Japan. So that makes life interesting. So I'm very excited to be with you guys here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Very looking forward as well. Thank you so much. So yeah, no, with no further ado, let's start. Let's start general and then go to more specifics. Stephanie, so you mentioned you work with marketing, sales, customer success. How does your day look like typically? Usually, in theory.
In theory, we're a mid-market organization, so we have about 200 people in our company, and of that, about 150 report in through my org, and so a lot of meetings. A lot of meetings. I do try to block myself out for some strategy, but often that's my job, right? My kids say, like, what do you do? And it sounds like you get paid to talk, right? Yeah, I kind of do get paid to talk. And so, one of the things that I think is a little bit different when you run the entire go-to-market strategy is that you're constantly trying to train your teams to take off their departmental hats and truly solve for revenue generation. And so when I think about like a day in the life, that's a lot of what I'm doing. I'm hearing about marketing's, managing. Yes, are we achieving? Are we driving results forward? But take off the hat and like, what are we doing as a team to make sure we're hitting our executive objectives, right? So, and that's in all my conversations from, skip levels with directors down to individual contributors and even managing up, like making sure that people are truly focused on the right thing and aligning objectives that way. That's what my day feels like. It's hectic, it's crazy. Usually there's so many meetings. If I have to get something done in between, I'm rushing that and answering Slack, and they can end up being really long days, as well, right? Agency life is crazy life. So.
Sounds familiar, even though I'm not a CRO. Regev, I see you nodding a lot. How about you?
Yeah, I think she's describing my day. Stephanie just described it. Yeah, I do have basically over 100 people in the CRO group, and I think it's not only meetings, but it's also the inner lock that keeps me busy. Because for me, um, I'm thinking about the first thing really for me is the customers and how they feel about us and how they perceive the experience working with us. That's my driver, right? My North Star, if you want. So if the interlocks don't work well, then you invite conflict, you invite people that think differently, and then they impart that feeling on the customers, and eventually that damages the customer experience. So I look at customers as partners, and as such, I spend a lot of time with the different teams. First of all, finding a match between what they do and what the customers need, and then finding a match between the teams and how they combine that effort to provide the best experience to customers, and not just product, but it's how they perceive the value, it's how they understand us, how we serve them, how we solve problems. I mean, we're in technology, there's always going to be problems. So how we solve problems. So yeah, like Stephanie, my day is really loaded with meetings. In the breaks between meetings, I do meetings, and when I have breaks for the meeting, in between meetings, I try to do actual thinking and work. I make sure that I have cadences in order to get by with this crazy schedule. I make sure to have the right cadences with the right folks and the right levels, with the right depth. I do feel like I'm the kind of detail-oriented person on one hand. On the other hand, I have to say that with this size of organization and complexity, I had to let go. I had to learn to let go and let my leaders decide what is the right thing to do. I think the secret of being able to manage, as Stephanie said, the secret is being able to juggle all this is, trust your team and empower them just enough so that they can do their jobs without having to go back to you all the time. So, I think that's the constant daily journey, if you want.
Makes sense. How about you, Joe? Anything different? Is the same?
Yeah, I would say mine's a little different, given that Influ2, I've been here about a year. We're smaller than their organizations. I came from a bigger organizations where I had like 12 leaders reporting into me. Now I only have one leader reporting into me. So I'm more in the infrastructure building phase right now, and I would say my goal is to be more proactive than reactive right now. Really trying to solve for problems and get into the process of trying to understand the root cause of everything. And to do that, it's there's meetings, right? I try to balance internal and external meetings. So I'm talking to customers, talking to prospects, and understanding, what the feel of the market is. Because I think we all know, go to markets over the last 18 months have shifted dramatically. Customer priorities have shifted dramatically. So I think we've had to make sure that we've had our ear on the ground to optimize for that as well. So for me, it's you have to solve problems, but I try to, instead of just treating the symptoms, try to find the disease and cure that. Because being a smaller company, we need to make sure that we have our fingers on that. We're solving for that before we sort of build out and exasperate some of these problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love what you said there, Joe, on trying to be proactive versus reactive, because it's something we can get stuck in, right? So I have like a sticky on my thing that says reset. And what the word reset means to me is like, okay, if you're in the weeds, like, and you're just reacting to everything that's going on, you've got your VP frustrated about this over here, you've got this happening over here, they're complaining about this. I mean, that happens when you're managing multiple departments. Like, that word for me is like, all right, like, what am I doing? Am I spending my time most effectively? And how do I get back out of the weeds and really focus back on that goal? But I've heard it from a lot of CROs. It's a recurring thing. It's like checking your reactive versus your proactive approaches, and it's real easy to get stuck down there. So I think that was really relevant. I experience that often.
Well, if I may just add to this, I think one of the best ways for me to stay very proactive and very involved is, and what I love to do most is meet customers and partners. So one of the best ways is actually to travel. So sometimes when you realize that when you actually get a ticket, a flight ticket, and fly, many things just, people get by. They make decisions. Things, just seems to be. It all seems to be fine, and everyone is okay. And I think to Joe's point, which is very important, kind of have your ear, to the ground and understand what's going on in the market. I think there's no better way of doing that than actually, go on a plane, meet people, handshake with them, go to events, see stuff that matters, what customers looking for, and then you go back to the office with much more insights, and much more centered, much more aligned to the important things, right?
I like that. I like that. Yes, absolutely. And Joe, you mentioned that you went from a bigger organization to a smaller one. And I always have three different guests because the role might be very different depending on the size of the company, industry, territory. What was the biggest shift from the biggest organization to a smaller one in your role?
Yeah, so my last one, I started there when we were about Influ2 size, and then I stuck with there for about 7 years to, that bigger version. I think, with the bigger company, I had a lot more structure in terms of my cadence of business. You're managing 150 people, 12 leaders, a bunch of different departments. You need to follow a cadence and have your leaders follow that cadence and really create that structure. Obviously, you have ad hoc meetings, you have other things, but there's just a lot more of a structured approach, where with the smaller, you're kind of floating around, right? You're looking for areas of friction, you're challenging ideas, you're looking for where should we double down. And we talk about solving problems and curing the disease, so to speak. Like, you're never going to be able to cure them all. So it's like, what problems can we live with? What problems, can we address later? What are critical mass that we need to approach right now? And with a smaller company, you have such limited resources. You need to decide what to look at. And I'm a big believer of intentionality and being very specific. And I think when you're with a small company, there's all of these external forces trying to pull you in 1,000 directions, and look over here, look over here, look over here. And you need to really trust, the business, your instincts, your peers, everyone, and make decisions on where do we focus right now? Because if you don't focus, you'll just spin your wheels.
Yeah, Joe, that's huge. And I think too, like, you're talking about prioritization, right? And where do you focus and what do you attack? And it's not just for your team, but it's prioritizing up too, is one of the things that came to mind for me while you were talking. Because if you often think of like the CEO, they're the idea generator often, like most often, right? They're visionary. They're constantly trying to come up with all of these things. And I think CROs that are newer in their role are constantly taking all of that ideation and trying to figure out how to prioritize and not pushing back. And that's one of the things that by the time I got to the role that I'm in, I felt like I knew how to do appropriately. But in past roles, it buried me, right? And it killed prioritization, which then turned into reactive approaches, right? Because you can only manage so much. So I love what you said there. It really prompted the thought of making sure we're going up too, right? On making prioritization possible.
Regev, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I've had my share of experience. For example, the last team I was in, I came on board as a CRO and COO, by the way. Um, when the team was eight, I left. The dynamic was, of course, different, and I left, and the team was over 200 people, and we were post IPO. So the dynamics changed in like less than 3 years dramatically. Um, I do subscribe to what Joe was and you, Stephanie, said about setting boundaries, and also, and I think one of the ways to do this is stick to two things. One is focus, and playbook is big for me. Like each department, each team needs to have a playbook. If they don't know where they're marching, how are they going to march? And second is stay a little closer to KPIs. So once you're focused and you have a playbook and you kind of measure things systematically, then it's easier to avoid ideas that are just ideas, and you can't really hold on to them, or measure them, or put a metric against them. And then you realize it's good strategy. I mean, we could probably deploy it somehow, but how do I measure my team against it? And if I can't, then it's something to think about again, and then brainstorm some more until you find the right recipe, adopting those ideas and translating them into operational guidelines. So I think that streamlining process is really important. Otherwise, you lose yourself in ocean. Sometimes you get requests from customers and partners, and you have to weigh against each of those requests. You need to have a dialogue with R&D, and a dialogue with
Yep.
product, and a dialogue with other core leaders, and you really need to know where you're taking this. Otherwise, it's very hard to drive meaningful conversations.
Yeah, and can be distracting, right?
Absolutely.
And then you forget what you were actually focused on
Yes.
doing in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, once again, I'm not a CRO, but I can totally relate to that. So yes, absolutely. And I like that you mentioned metrics, Regav. Which usually metrics and KPIs do you focus on in your role?
Ooh, don't get me started there. How long do you have?
Not long,
No,
not long.
I look. I think there's about. If I look at my KPI dashboard right now, I'm looking at about um, 40 to 45 KPIs for my organization. But there's my favorites, and I think they are kind of like the health KPIs, which is NDR or NLR, the net expansion, net dollar expansion rate, which basically tells me the story of customers that love me and stay, and customers that buy more, and they love me so much they're willing to expand, and I appreciate them for it. And then there's a win rate that tells me how my team is doing, looking into new opportunities, pursuing them, stay really focused on them, and then win them, and how long it takes them to win those opportunities. Um, ASP is one of my favorite because it's also an indicator of how much value I'm able to explain to customers. If the value is not big enough, then I'm getting little deals. No disrespect to little deals, but the aspiration is to get to larger tickets. Um, there's more and more and more, but I'd say, those four that I mentioned are, probably the key. I think the subset of NDR is churn rate and retention rate, and then you have like crossroads there, and TTM retention and gross retention in the quarter. And there's many of those metrics that you kind of look at your, you know, landscape. I know companies, and maybe in Joe's stage, when I was in that stage, I was looking at how many new logos I'm acquiring and a quarter, and measuring this a little more carefully. And so I think that I mean, we live with a lot of KPIs, but I think I always talk to the team a lot about those, because I think for me, they symbolize the health of our business and our growth. And it helps me to look into myself and see what am I doing right, and how to do more of it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Joe, what's for you the KPIs and the metrics?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nature of our role is a lot of the internal staff is looking at this week, this month, this quarter, and we're trying to use KPIs to diagnose what does the future look like. I look at a lot of data simply for diagnostics. I try to protect the team from a lot of that, though, because again, intentionality. I want them to be fully invested in what it means to win and what we're focused on, and hitting KPIs isn't winning, right? Hitting KPIs is shows health and it shows that we're headed in the right direction, but that's not the goal. So I do think some organizations get lost in the weeds and they have different departments focused on different KPIs, and I think that creates a lack of alignment amongst groups. So for me, I try to really limit the numbers I present and the information I present to the overall team, so we are aligned in what it means to win, and we have a focus on what we're trying to achieve.
Makes sense. Stephanie.
Yeah. So, very similarly, I have a lot of KPIs, but more importantly, very similar to Joe's comment as well, I kind of run a EOS style. I don't know if you're familiar, it's the executive operating system, right? But I run that style of meeting, which allows us to bring in a scorecard every month and really skinny down what my senior leaders are looking at. And so we have 5 core KPIs that are not metrics, but truly KPIs that are allowing us to see if a problem is coming before it is here, right? Like that is the purpose of discussing them. We don't discuss them if they're green. We really dive deep if they're red, right? And if they're yellow, we'll put it on our list to talk about to make sure that we're addressing it. But one of the big things here is, remember what I said in the beginning, like taking departmental hats off and working together. If sales pipeline, for example, is starting to slow, that is a KPI that shows us we've got to now double click and diagnose into that 50 list, right? That 100 list of where is something going wrong and how do we address it? But it's not sales or just marketing's fault. It's everyone's issue to address, right? Those ones that funnel up, the 5, I have customer health scores. Which we have a scorecard that is very quantitatively filled out by our strategists that show us like what percentage of our total book of business is happy, right? So that would indicate future churn. We have out of scope pipeline, and we have very loose definitions and permissions on what makes it to pipeline for a reason with existing clientele, so we can watch what's being discussed. So that's a big one. Obviously, volume of SQLs. I used to track MQL. I am not an MQL fan anymore. I'm an SQL fan. Show me what's qualified. Show me what we're talking about. And then obviously win rate, deal velocity, because those are things that feed into how I built our forecast on more of a waterfall model. So if something's happening or slowing, I need to know about it really, really fast. We also have some conversion metrics that we look at that are a bit different, right? Of if you sell a project, what's our percentage of conversion to retainer, etc. But very similar to Joe and Rajiv, it's all of the things they said, but it's what do you look at every day to try to drive the behaviors that you need to drive.
And maybe one more point on KPIs and metrics. It's easy to drown in them, as Joe said. I think one of the things I am very adamant about is that the different teams' KPIs interlock. So if there's a mismatch between, just for the sake of discussion here, pipeline KPIs that are assigned to marketing, and then the sales team don't feel like they own the pipeline as well, because they're just waiting for it to fall from the sky, then what are we doing here? So those matching, KPIs, and then I know maybe not a topic we want to talk about, but eventually some of those trickle into comp. Those KPIs need to lock, because otherwise we're working towards other things. And there's one more thing that I heard from someone saying, which I really liked, is that there's 2 types of things to look at, is activity metrics and outcome metrics. What I mentioned earlier is mainly outcome. there's a lot of, and I think it's a good idea, Stephanie, to look at it on the scorecard level and to look at the activity metrics and see what they actually yield. And then when you look at your outcome metrics, you find the correlation of, yeah, I've been not doing enough of that. So no wonder my outcome metric looks like that. And then, as Stephanie says, like double clicking is normally going to be the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the same approach just in the sales department, right? So I supervise the business development, and I always say to my team, if you don't do the minimum of activities, I will tell you that the issue is the activity level. So in order to go deeper, you should do the bare minimum of activities that we require, right? Otherwise, we will never go to the root cause of the issue. That makes a lot of sense. Good. We don't have much time left. I just have two questions. So obviously, we departments meetings, being proactive and not reactive, and uh, how do you keep updated with everything what's going on in order to be able to juggle all of this? So where do you keep where do you get inspired, Joe?
Yeah, so I think, being a CRO can be a lonely role at times. I think I talk about this a lot, being a CRO and a parent as well. You go through your day with a lot of people needing things from you, right? So for me, I keep a close network of other leaders. I'm a part of Pavilion. I communicate a lot with friends that are CROs, friends that are VP of sales, friends that are VP of marketing, and just chat with them about, sometimes it's, hey, how have you solved this? Hey, have you run into this? Hey, here's what we're doing. Sometimes it's just venting, right? Because they
That's
get
very
it,
important. That's very
right?
important. Yes. They
And
see
I think
you.
it's just, what books have you read? What articles have you read? What, this type of thing. And what are you seeing? The other part is just, what are you seeing in the market for you, right? Because, we have, I'm contained to my base of prospects and customers. I want to hear from what they're seeing in the market as well. So I think that internal network of, whether it's mentors or peers or just trusted advisors or friends that understand, is important.
Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, very similar, right? It is. I agree with you. It can be a really lonely role. I am very active in Pavilion as well, and so spend a lot of time there. I think the other thing is, as you grow, you can't be the expert in everything anymore. And so that's another thing that I've just adopted over the years. Like, for a while, I wanted to be always up on trends and know this and know that and know all the martech that's coming out, and it can drive you mad, right? Because there's so many things changing every single day. And so I really started to empower my direct leaders to be the expert on something, and making sure that they're sharing a trend or a news article or something that's going on or something that they've seen with the greater team, so that I don't put all that weight on my shoulders, right? Because that's a lot. So, but I will say what Joe said, right? Like, a lot of friends, a lot of mentees, mentors, which I find go both ways all the time, right? In learnings, from family, to even interdepartmental peers. So CFO, SVP of creative, seeing what they're hearing. And then, of course, lastly, the customer, like really making sure that we're hearing what's going on with them and how we can solve those problems. So.
Regev, how about you? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I'm connecting to the last point. I think customers are like, and partners are a really great source, especially when you talk to them a lot, during your work week. Um, are a good source of learning what's going on in their world, because they're in different countries, they're in different markets, different industries. They're impacted in different ways. If they're big, if they're small, the gaming planet is very different from the automotive or the finance planets. So you can't be a master of everything, but when you talk to those folks, you learn a lot. The other thing I find myself, interestingly enough, is learning from interviews. So I interview a lot of people, a lot. And I find myself to have good conversations with a lot of intelligent people that went through a lot, and just by having those conversations, you learn, from what they want to do, what they've done, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And of course, maybe the final point, without repeating anything you guys said, was all true, is events. Trying to force my calendar into attending here an event, there an event, not just work events, but networking events and meeting people, going to, I get invited to all kind of executive or CRO dinners, or so sometimes people just dismiss them, but sometimes you sit there in front of someone and you spend half an hour talking to them, learning so much from what's going on in their land. So I really try and make some space for those in my schedule, whether it's locally or when I'm traveling.
Yeah, makes sense. I can relate to that. I also I learned a lot in interviews and in events as well. I remember once I interviewed a candidate. He used to work for one of our customers, and he gave us also feedback on our product that I took to my product team. So sometimes even about your product, you can learn in interviews. So yeah, totally relate to that. Good. We are almost in the end. So the last question is. Basically, we wrap up what success means to you and challenges. And I always show an email that's supposedly written to the department or the role that I'm interviewing, and we'll get your brutal, honest feedback. No worries, it's anonymous. I invented all of the names, so feel free to give your perspective. So I'll just share with you guys. So first name, so let's say Joe, Stephanie, Regev. CROs have been asking, how can I maximize sales productivity without burnout? What activities are my successful reps doing? What are our leading indicators for pipeline and revenue? These answers hide in data within your disparate tech stack. Curious, are you using any tech to surface these insights today? Best, John. Stephanie, what's your take in this email? Does it speak to you or not really?
On the spot. Okay. I like how short it is. I like that it's bulleted. I'm fast, so don't send me anything that's like a paragraph. I won't read it. I don't see a lot of customization or personalization in this email. And I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago where it was all about old school's new school. So I would have liked a little bit of personalization or customization in this email. The other thing, and I think that I would probably read this, and I like that there's a call to action. You're asking me if these are things that I'm running into, but you're assuming that I am asking these questions when I might not be, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we be a little bit more open-ended? That's my immediate gut feedback.
Awesome. No, that's great. Joe, does it speak to your heart or not really?
So I do think that my disclaimer is I think judging an email in a vacuum is hard, because I think the success of this is the sum of the parts of the sequence, not just the email.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to Stephanie's point, like you could add personalization based off of, your voicemail or a LinkedIn touch or some social touches ahead of this. But looking at the email, I get a lot with similar messaging. So I think differentiation is key. Right. A way to do that is social proof. Maybe add a testimonial, maybe add a couple customers, maybe a link to a case study or something. But I think this can work if it's paired correctly with other activities in the sequence.
Fine. Nice. Regev, what's your take here?
Look, I think it's it generally, yes. I think it's kind of generic. And if I was to use this, I would probably try and make it a little shorter, and also customize it a little more, knowing, as part of a sequence, knowing who I'm sending it to. I'll probably try and aim it at, try and mention vocabulary that speaks to the industry of who I'm sending it to. So if I'm sending it to someone in the aerospace industry, I would try and weave in vocabulary that feels home, for them, so that it triggers an emotional response versus just reading a vanilla text. But other than that, it looks like it can work in conjunction with other things.
Very nice. Awesome. That's very good, especially coming from CROs, because I found in my other episodes people in the commercial teams are very harsh on the emails, and then people on my product or tech, they are a bit more nicer. So it's interesting that you see that you are a bit more nicer and understanding than marketing departments, sales departments. So it's really, really cool. Good. Thank you so much, everyone, Stephanie, Joe, Rege, for taking your precious time to speak with me today. It was an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure that those who are listening learned a lot as well about the CRO's role. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.